Welcome to Washington in Focus. My name is Art Kane, and I'm managing editor for investigations at the Center Square. I'm joined by one of my investigative reporters, TJ Martinell, who's been looking into state budgets and finding some interesting things in Washington about what kind of spending they're going to have and what is happening. TJ, you wrote pretty early about the fact that there's going to be some serious budget deficits in the next few years in Washington. Tell us a little bit about what the lawmakers are facing and what they're going to do about it.
Yeah, so this was actually a couple of years ago. I got tipped off about this discrepancy with the budget that a friend of mine or a source, a watchdog, noted. And so I was reaching out to OFM, and they gave me a bit of a response. Then a couple weeks later, the governor announced that we were going to be in this massive incoming governor. Ferguson announced that we were going to be going into a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit. And so it's been, a couple of years since then, and we're in the middle of a legislative session where they're still dealing with the budget deficit. And so I think the biggest takeaway for people who are listening to understand, this is at a time when Washington state revenue is higher than it's ever been. This is not driven by the Great Recession back in 2009, 2010, 2011. They had to cut billions from the state operating budget, not because of spending getting out of control necessarily, but because the revenue, just the housing market crashed. Everything was, the economy was in a recession, obviously. And so they had to cut in response to reduced revenue. In this case, they are increasing spending so fast that revenue isn't keeping up. And instead of trying to tighten the purse strings in terms of spending, they're trying to come up with new ways to get revenue, when the business community and a lot of industries are already saying that they've reached their maximum amount of taxes that they can deal with. So that's kind of what's going on, is that this is not a fiscal crisis that couldn't have been avoided. This is it. And it could also get infinitely worse. I think it was, I can't remember who it was, but they said, never say it can't get any worse, because that's about when it starts to get worse. So it could get far worse than what it is right now. So that's pretty much the long and short of it for that.
And so you've written about a while ago, you wrote about a decade's worth of spending where you saw a massive increase. Obviously, over COVID, federal money floated in or poured in, and they spent it freely, and now that money might be getting cut off. So is that one of the factors of kind of their fiscal fallout there, is that the federal money's coming to an end, and so they have to figure out how to tax the taxpayers of the state?
That, and I think they just have increased spending in so many different areas. Like the K-12 education, they've spent a lot of money. You've got, I believe it's Medicare. Spending has increased significantly. They're now trying to fund Medicaid, a state-based form of Medicaid for illegal aliens. That's $150 million for the current biennium. Then you just have all this increased spending on different things through different state agencies. And I did a story a while back about looking at all these different departments that have just seen an explosion in terms of the amount of money they're spending. And these become the baseline for what people are expecting. So you have all these people who are expecting to get taxpayer dollars. And so trying to cut the budget or cut spending in places can become very difficult, because people will then go and lobby to maintain that spending. And so that's another, it's not just the COVID stuff, because people were warning back. In the mid 2010s, that's when the revenue started really going up. And the legislature's response at the time was to spend almost all of it. And there were lawmakers saying, hey guys, it's sunny outside right now, but the rain will come. And is our rainy day fund going to be sufficient? And so we have what's called a budget stabilization account. It's known as the rainy day fund. It's meant to be used as an emergency reserve to plug operating budget gaps. When your budget is $30 billion, as it was like 13 years ago, and you've got $2 to $3 billion in the hopper, that's one thing. But when you've got $3 billion and your budget is $85 billion, that's a problem.
So You wrote recently about several times where they're basically taking money from one agency to try backfill the general fund spending. And so what kind of things are we already seeing that the public or the people who live in Washington aren't going to get?
Yeah, so this is the interesting thing about how these changes in these fund shifts can affect a lot of different stuff. So there's this very relatively unknown program that's funded through the Public Works Assistance Account. It's a low interest revolving loan that allows local governments to fund infrastructure projects that are like sewage, water, wastewater management, bridges, roads, a variety of things. And this isn't the fanciest shiny bauble on the planet or in the state or as part of state government. It doesn't sound very interesting, but it's very important. It's one of the most effective, efficient government programs. From what I've been told by numerous people, this is like the gold standard program. There's no fraud, there's no waste. Because it's a revolving loan, it pays for itself. I mean, it does have money come in, but it's the interests on it allows them to continue investing more and more into these projects. And the state has taken billions out of it since it was formed to plug state operating budget holes, and that really started in the 2000s. The issue is that means that there's projects not getting funded, and that includes water and sewage that is necessary for land to be developed properly so houses can be built. And so on the one hand, the legislature is trying to increase housing supply. On the other hand, they've been diverting funds from this account that make it possible in many cases for those houses to be built in the first place. Because if you don't have that, you can't build the houses. So, and then on top of that, when the housing isn't built, it affects local and state revenue. Because there's all these different fees and taxes that occur as part of the house construction projects. So it's this secondary impact or effect on state revenue when they divert funds from this account.
And Washington has touted itself as one of the states with no income tax, but now they're talking about an income tax for at least the very wealthy. What's your sense of how likely that is that to pass?
I mean, here's the reality. We do have an income tax, contrary to what the state Supreme Court says. The capital gains tax is a tax on the income derived from the sale of a capital gains. And the reason why it's an income tax is because if you do not report any income through the sale of a capital gains or capital gains, you do not pay a tax. Whereas with a excise tax, what they're claiming it is, you pay the excise tax regardless of whether or not you make a profit off the sale. So that's why the real estate excise tax, if you sell your house at a loss, you still owe the tax. The fact that they were able to uphold that tax, despite the fact that it's blatantly unconstitutional, by all historical documents that I've seen and the Constitution's definition of property and how we have a requirement that all classes of property have to be taxed at a uniform rate, I think that it's very likely we will see this tax. It's going to get challenged in court and it's going to get upheld. Probably, who knows what's going to happen. But the fact that they were willing to ignore so much historical precedent in this regard and what the historical record says, it should give pause to anybody who makes over a certain amount of income in the state or people who might come here to escape a state that does have an income tax. And this does something to point out. This doesn't affect somebody who has wealth already or, has a lot of money and doesn't make too much from their income, but they've already accumulated their wealth. This is going to tax people who are making money, whereas they proposed a wealth tax that is based off of how much wealth you currently have, not how much income you're generating. So, that's arguably caused people like Jeff Bezos to leave Washington State. He sold all of his Amazon stock in Florida. That cost Washington State a lot of money that they would have otherwise collected through the capital gains tax. So it's just an example of where the tax that the people they intend to tax can easily move or go somewhere else. Right. And so it provides the opportunity to say, hey, we're not getting the revenue we wanted, so we're going to lower the rate and we're going to lower the threshold that it's a millionaire's tax now. That's a good way to get the foot in the door. But what happens when the millionaires all start to leave, or they got a home somewhere else and they just claim residency there? If somebody owns two homes in two different states, they have a very strong bargaining position to say, okay, I'm just going to go claim residency in another state to avoid paying this tax.
That is true. Well, I'm sure you're going to keep on digging into the budget as the legislative session goes on. So thanks for joining me, TJ. This has been Washington in Focus. Thank you.